my rant about the Polymega multi-platform system, whatever the hell it is, the modular gaming system. There's been a lot of talk about it, and the more the talk is, the more it seems like people are splitting into one of two groups. One, either that this is a complete and utter scam, the other who are completely behind this 100%, and nothing that can be said could sway them from that. And that's kind of disturbing, because looking at it, it's like, healthy skepticism is always good. Always good. Because otherwise, you can get fleeced sometimes, you know? So, but one of the things I want to talk about is I kind of finally figured out my feelings on it, which does lean more toward the scam side. But, not that they are trying to scam us, but this is just an overly lofty, over-the-top type device, and I just kind of question who it's marketed towards. The whole concept is you play your actual games, your physical copies of games on these devices. The problem is it's all software emulation. They have completely cut out FPGA just from the bat. Some people are, oh yes, the increase to the CPU means that they can do other things later on, and it's a good thing they dropped the FPGA. I don't see how that's a thing. I don't see how going for a slightly better CPU meant you had to cut out the FPGA. You could have gone for a slightly better CPU, kept all the features, and still kept the FPGA. I know people are saying, well, the price. I mean, the price is kind of at a premium as it is. So, like, if you're going to make a type of device that is an all-in-one, that is as accurate as possible, which there's a little asterisk there, we'll get into that in a second, to play the actual games in high def. Okay. The little asterisk. We'll do that one first. Polymega has said, they have stated publicly that the emulation accuracy is for snobs. That's a big red flag right there. Like, I don't understand how anyone is okay with that. That's like saying, no, the AtGames Sega Genesis units that have graphic and sound issues, that some of the sound issues make your ears bleed. No, that's just for snobs. It's still the game's good, right? Even though the graphics can look like crap sometimes, the sound is, ear piercing, but just for snobs. There has never been anyone I've seen defend the AtGames Sega consoles. In fact, so much so, Sega has now removed AtGames from their Genesis Mega Drive Mini that they are working on. So, like, that says something, that quality is kind of important. The second thing is, if you're playing your legitimate games, like, this is my copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga. This is, like, I don't have the original case. I've said that. I was a dumb kid and trashed all of my cases. I kept manuals, but the manuals don't fit in standard DVD-sized boxes. This is a really expensive game. Several $100s. This device is marketed to people as like, hey, do you want to play your several $100 copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga in subpar quality? Then buy the Polymega. That's what it's screaming to me. If you want something that's not going to be accurate, that we don't want to give accuracy because that's for snobs, who is this device marketed towards? The people who have the physical quality, or physical copies of the games. If you have the physical copies of the games, typically you have a way of playing them. You either have a CRT laying around, if you want to play them on a big screen. There are so many ways to do that. You can pick up just a cheap $50 upscaler that's going to probably mangle the signal, but it'll still be better quality than emulation issues. And have that take whatever composite signal you want and turn it into HDMI. I've used them before. You could go all out and spend $300 on a FrameMeister and you'd still be coming out ahead. And then you could play it on actual hardware. Like, if you want to play your several $100 copy of Panzer Dragoon, or maybe your $100 copy of Dragon Force or Shining Force 3, you can play them in subpar quality on our console. Just give us a lot of money and hope that it delivers. Yeah, that's how I feel that it's being marketed. It's, do you want to play your actual physical game in subpar quality? Because we are relying solely on software emulation. Now, to be fair, I have tried out several software emulators of varying consoles the last couple of days. I've even tried Mednafen, which is supposedly the emulator they are using for the Saturn. I've tried that on 2 devices. I've tried that on my desktop, which my desktop is rather beefy. I could put the specs in the video description. It's i7, 8 gig of RAM, you know, GeForce 960, like not a super, you know, heavy system, but heavier than average. And then I've tried it on my laptop, which is an Intel Pentium 2, like 1.8 gigahertz processor. Like, it's literally just a derpy little laptop. Knowing that the performance is probably going to be somewhere in the middle, because it's the CPU that they have stated for the Polymega is not a beefy CPU at all. It is a low-end CPU. In fact, a lot of people who have looked at the specs say that this CPU alone is not going to be powerful enough to run the base version of Mednafen. So there's going to have to be a heavily optimized version of it, which supposedly they are working on, because Polymega tweeted out to the person who made Mednafen and thanked them personally, and then deleted the tweet because they haven't really announced what emulator they're using for all of this. So that's a thing. Like, why not? That's something that should be discussed early on. But I have tried Mednafen, specifically on the Saturn, on Panzer Dragoon, Zwei, and Nights into Dreams, and I could get them running really good on my desktop. I mean, surprisingly good on my desktop, actually. And then I could get them on the laptop. The frame rate was probably about 10 frames a second, so not really the best quality. There was a lot of jittering, a lot of stuttering, a lot of stopping. So I'm expecting there to be somewhere in between. And I know that the Polymega people have released a video stating, oh yes, this is gameplay from, like, they haven't shown that that's gameplay from the console. And I know everyone's sitting here going, well, even if they showed the console working, people wouldn't believe it. Like, there's gonna have to be some concept. You're gonna have to see this thing working, because otherwise they could have just recorded footage from, like, my PC running this and saying, oh yeah, it's gonna be the same thing because it's the same emulator, but it's not the same specs. Like, the Polymega has 4 gig of RAM and a pretty weak CPU in the grand scheme of things. Like, not as weak as my laptop, but, you know, not a powerful CPU from what everyone's stating. And then the next thing is that now that they have a beefier CPU than what they were using, this beefier CPU, because it only has 2 cores as opposed to 4, they've had to cut out a lot of features. They had to cut out the Twitch, they had to cut out the social network aspects of it. They had to cut out, you know, a lot of stuff that had originally been promised. And they're like, oh, now, you know, Dreamcast and N64 can be, you know, supported in the future. The Dreamcast can't. I've actually been following a thread on Resetera, Resetera. Resetera. There's a forum there about the Polymega and discussing. There's one thing that I completely forgot about. Dreamcast games are not CD-ROMs. They are GD-ROMs. They are very different. It's a very specific proprietary type of format. So much so that even the Dreamcast itself has problems reading them sometimes. Because this is my retail copy of Skies of Arcadia. Now you can tell it's a retail copy because of how the disc is actually laid out. Everything about it, it is the legit disc. All of the printing on the front is very specific. The printing on disc 2 is the exact same. It's all very, very particular. I went through 3 Dreamcasts when I was doing a Let's Play of this, because 3 Dreamcasts would not play disc 2. They could play so much other stuff, but disc 2 was getting kind of choppy. It wouldn't read. Now, this game, Power Stone 2, this is not a legit copy. I didn't know this when I bought it. I bought this off eBay years ago, and it took me a long time to realize this is a burned copy. It's got a specific label. It's not shiny on the front. I didn't know this. I didn't realize this. And then the back has, it's very hard to see with the glare, there's a serial number for the CD. Like, this is a CD-ROM. These are GD-ROMs. Now, you cannot put a GD-ROM in a CD-ROM and have it play because of how the GD-ROM works. It's like you can't put a DVD in a CD-ROM and expect it to work. There are some grooves on the GD-ROMs that are CD compatible, which is where you can get like your high def, wallpaper art and stuff, because Sega actually put a lot of extras on their discs. And if you wanted to put it in a CD, yeah, you could get wallpaper art for your PC and all this and that, whatever. But the game itself is on the GD-ROM. Now, with the Polymega, the whole thing is putting the disc in and playing it yourself. GD-ROMs are no longer in production. There were some CD-ROMs that were in production that could be modified to read GD-ROMs at the lowest speed possible so that you could dump the game in GDI format. But those have been out of production since 2004, according to someone who seems to have a great deal of knowledge about the Dreamcast hardware. So the only way you would play Dreamcast games is if you burn a copy of a Dreamcast game as a compressed CD-ROM format, because there are obviously ways to do it. That was one of the Dreamcast's biggest problems, was piracy. Being able to find self-booting discs, burning them onto a blank CDR, and popping it in your console. That seems to be the only way Dreamcast games will play on this console, unless they can dig up someone to manufacture a specific GD-ROM drive to put that in the Polymega. But that's not going to happen at start, because Dreamcast isn't supported at start. They have to hit some sort of ridiculous lofty stretch goal. So how are we going to do Dreamcast support later on? Well, they can't add a module to it, because the CD drive is a part of the base console. The modules are very small devices, basically controller ports and a section for you to stick a cartridge in to dump the ROM into the system. And that's all it does. So there's not a module large enough, nor is this console designed to have another CD-ROM attached to it to where you could play Dreamcast games. So how would that happen? Unless they completely redesign the system and force you to buy a new one later on to play Dreamcast games. But for all the early adopters, that may not be a thing. There's a lot of goals, a lot of things that are being like, we want to do this. Yes, that'd be great. But then things are getting kind of lost in translation. Things are having to be cut to meet any sort of, profit medium or, deadline medium. Like they're trying to split things down the middle. and they're creating this console that really has a massive identity crisis of who is this being marketed towards. Is it being marketed toward the person like me who has all of these really, really good games for some really obscure systems, and I want a way to play that in HD? Well, chances are, if they're like me and they've spent either a great deal of time or money or both to get these games, they have means of playing them. Like, yeah, having a more all-in-one function is great, but then when you start saying, yes, it's all-in-one at a cost, at accuracy, then, like, if I'm going to play a game, I want to play the game in the best possible way, right? I don't want there to have to be, like, if I could play Streets of Rage 2 on the Genesis, or Streets of Rage 2 on the at-Games Genesis, knowing one is going to be crap, like, what's the point? I mean, I know there are going to be some people like, oh yes, this is just an easy way of doing it, but, like, the at-Games things, they are sold dirt cheap for this reason, because they know that it's not a quality product. It's a stopgap product. It's a, oh, you want to play the game now? Okay, well, you can play it now until, you know, either you figure out how to do it in much better quality, or until Sega releases it on something else. And you can play, like, oh yeah, you can download it onto your PS4. You can download it onto your Xbox. You can download it on your Switch. Whatever. The at-Games things are never meant to be a full-on replacement. People don't buy the at-Games consoles to play their Genesis cartridges, like the ones I have here, on their HD TV, because there is going to be graphical or auditory issues with it. So, like, yeah, you know, you might get a grandparent who buys it and be like, yeah, no, it's... But the people who they buy it for are going to quickly abandon it if they have any idea of what the games are supposed to be like, or if they know that there's going to be a better way of playing it. So, like I said, this device just has a very, very strong identity crisis. Is it meant for the casual gamers? Well, if it's meant for the casual gamers, why do you need, like, why are you making it such a big deal to have the games? Because casual gamers are not going to go out and spend $400 on a game to play it in a subpar quality on your console. Casual gamers, like, there's not too many casual gamers that have a Sega Saturn collection. There's not too many casual gamers that have a Sega CD collection. There's even fewer casual gamers that have a TurboGrafx CD collection. Like, all of the things that the base unit of this have, just for CD purposes, that is not your average collector. Some of the modules, maybe. So the Genesis, the SNES, the NES, and even then, the NES and the SNES, there are so many other ways to play NES or SNES games these days that are cheaper. Considerably cheaper. Like, the Wii Virtual Console was, it's not active at the moment, but it was for a long time. The Wii U Virtual Console is still active. Nintendo just released their online system for NES games. And, you know, the NES and SNES classics are available for a fraction of the price. Like, yeah, you don't get to play all of the games unless you take the time and effort to mod the console and add the ROMs yourself, but, like, that's possible. Yeah, it's like, it's more effort than, you know, what your average grandparent's gonna do, but it's also considerably less. I mean, I don't know about you, but my grandmother's not gonna go out and spend $250+ to, you know, have her grandkids or great-grandkids be able to play games. Like, that's not, it's not fairly realistic. So, like, that type of argument just kind of falls flat with me. truth of the matter is, this thing needs some skepticism. Until there is a working device that can be shown publicly. Like, you don't even need to at this point they need to not worry about, oh yeah, here's game footage, here's, like, this is not something you need to show. This is something you need to show working. Take it to a trade show. Next E3, next TGS, next PAX, whatever. Take it, be like, yeah, here it is, it's working. That's the only way you're going to get any sort of people to stop doubting it. And even then, the Coleco Chameleon had a working version at a trade show. It's like, I don't want to come across as just being completely, down on this, because it's a really good concept. But I think the concept is being ignored for profit at this point. We want to have an all-in-one device to play games in HD on modern TVs in the best way possible. Well, they're cutting off the best way possible. They're cutting off sections to be, I don't even know. I don't. And the concept behind it kind of terrifies me, because like they are basically crowdfunding this. They are not. This is a Kickstarter without Kickstarter. It's not on Kickstarter. It's not on Indiegogo. They can't put it on Kickstarter because they don't have a working prototype of what they're actually going to be selling. So they can't do that. They could do Indiegogo, but they're not. So they are basically doing crowdfunding as pre-orders on their website. And there's actually a bunch of people who have commented on a couple of videos talking about that they do credit card fraud analysis, and saying that the best thing to do is not actually pre-order it now. Pre-order it in October, end of October, because then that gives you enough of a window to when they're supposed to release, which is supposed to be April 1st of next year. That gives you enough of a window to where if it doesn't release April 1st, you can still cancel your pre-order through your credit card company. And so you're not out the money, because at this point it is literally you are giving an unknown entity a great deal of money and hoping that they're not going to run away with it. And you have no protection behind that. So I really feel a lot of healthy skepticism is kind of warranted. I love the idea. The idea behind this is great, but I think that's the problem. It is too good of an idea. It's just too much. Like, they took the idea of a Retron console and they just wanted to supersize the hell out of it. But at the same time, they're not doing anything to address the issues of why Retrons are okay, but they're not the best replacement for the actual hardware. And they're not the best replacement for, spending money to get things like an OSSC, a FrameMeister, or even just a $50 upscaler. Like, there are other alternatives. Because as it is now, software-based emulation, there is one 100% accurate software-based emulator. And that's BSNES or Hygen, whatever it's called now. Everything else is not 100%. There are issues. You can get close to 100%, but there are going to be some issues somewhere along the lines. And then the person who made the FPGA related things, it's just like, this is a lofty goal, but, as of right now, original hardware is still the best way to play a lot of these games. Yeah, you don't get a lot of the fancy bells and whistles, but at this point, the Polymega people are cutting out some of the fancy bells and whistles right off the bat. So, there's just a lot of speak to this. I don't know what kind of speak, but it's stuff that puts me on edge. So, just take a minute to think about it and look at it, a little more objectively. Is the idea good? Yes. Is the presentation good? It's had a lot of hiccups. is the implementation going to be as good? Probably not. There's always some sort of concession made. And the question I've asked in previous videos, what are you willing to sacrifice to play a game that you're never going to be able to play elsewhere? Are you willing to risk some graphical, auditory issues, some glitches, some hiccups? And if so, what are you willing to pay? Because it's a scale, it's a balancing act. It's like, do you want to pay a premium and get a premium product, or do you want to pay a bargain price and get a bargain price product? You kind of want something in between. And the problem is, I don't think it's hit that equilibrium yet. I think the price might be a little too high for what they're asking for just a software emulation box, knowing that there's going to be some issues. And the fact that there have been some really shady things that, you know, could be attributed as accidents, incidents, misunderstandings, but it's still really hard to look at a company. It's like, yeah, you've made a mistake. It's really hard to recover from a mistake like that. And it's really hard to regain trust when it's like, oh yeah, we screwed up. Really hard. Especially when there is not a product available. So, again, my long-winded thoughts on it aside, just take a couple of minutes to look at it and go, maybe. Maybe. So, with that, I'm going to go. I know there's going to be thoughts and comments on it. Leave them in the comment section. Everyone behave. Don't rip each other apart. Be respectful. Everyone has a different opinion. It's just going to be the long and short of it. So, we'll see how it goes. Honestly, I would love for this to work. I would love for this to be a thing. But I'm also a pessimist by nature. So, at least that's what everyone tells me. So, with that, I'll be back for another rant. Don't know what it's going to be. I'll wait and see. Who knows? So till then, later everyone.